a lot of you saw us right up front right here. We're with Pentaho. We are giving away 2 49er tickets to the Baltimore Ravens game. It's coming up, I think, in a few weeks. So if you haven't done so, come up, say hi to us, and register to win some.
Awesome, thank you. And thanks to Pentaho and Perkins Coie. Both of them are sponsors of the Hive. Is anyone from Perkins Coie here? No, but thank you, Perkins Coie. So good. If you are on Twitter and you're tweeting about today's event, please use the hashtag Hive Data so people will be able to kind of follow what you're saying. You're welcome to use the Hive Data handle, which is &Hive Data, but more importantly, use the hashtag. Just a few minutes about who the Hive is. So the Hive is a venture studio that, in addition to giving startups capital, really incubates, launches companies. So we work very closely with companies, and we have a think tank, which is you're all members of. We do events, typically 3 every month, with people anywhere from like today's audience to, I don't know how many of you came to hear the founder of NetApp and the founder of Apple. So kind of events like that with 700 people or so. And there's a common theme to our events. It's around data, around entrepreneurship. So in data, around applications and use cases, data infrastructure, data analytics, data science, and today's technical talk is in that area, and then many events around entrepreneurship. We have 2 events, and there are a few more that are in the process of getting announced. The first one is going to be moderated by our very good friend, Elizabeth Waskin from the Wall Street Journal, and it's about social bias in algorithms. So when you're using Tinder or you're using Amazon and a product is recommended to you, when you see an ad, or very importantly, an online app for jobs basically kind of recommends which job is right for you, and simultaneously for the recruiter tells them which candidate is right for them. There is often bias in the algorithms, and the bias reflects the bias of the people developing the algorithms. And so this event, which will be held at Visa, another great sponsor of ours, will explore kind of that whole theme and topic. Think about when bias is used and you're denied credit. So that's a lot of implications. The event we have on Thursday, September 24th, is going to be around blockchain and the potential of blockchain. So blockchain is the underlying infrastructure for Bitcoin, the public network that is today used for cryptocurrency, but there are a number of different applications in IoT, supply chain, security, and a number of financial applications that are all rapidly moving to use either the Bitcoin network or in many cases a private implementation of blockchain. And so that's going to be a fascinating event. Thanks to all our sponsors, Cloudera, Aerospike, Visa, Pentaho, Perkins Coie, and our partners. The Hive itself, as I said, incubates, funds, launches companies, all with a common theme around data. We have a number of startups. I saw Foghorn out there, an IoT company, but we have a number of other startups. So if you're interested in joining any of them, reach out to me, tmravi@hivedata.com. All our startups are looking for people, but today we feature one of them, Foghorn, looking for a number of, so they're a platform for applications and analytics on the edge and integrated with various clouds. And so very exciting space, very strategic relationship with GE, focused on industrial internet. So they're hiring a number of senior engineers and some consulting field engineers to do implementations and deployments in the working along with GE and others. With that, please use the hashtag Hive Data. With that, I'd like to introduce Will Gorman. So Will Gorman is a VP, and some of you probably know that Pentaho got acquired about 4 months ago, by Hitachi Data Systems, a kind of a high-end storage vendor. So this allows, sort of, in my opinion, it's not, I don't know, but you can speak for HDS, allows them to get into the data and the analytics space, which I think is a very good thing for them. And so Will is the chief architect there, and has a very interesting background, and has also worked at GE on areas ranging from jet engines to various kind of medical related areas.
Absolutely, and thank you.
Thank you. And so we'll keep the questions to the end of his talk, and then we'll welcome the questions.
Great.
With that,
Thank you very much.
thank you.
Hi everybody, thanks for coming out tonight. And tonight's topic is going to be around Streamlined Data Refinery, and I'm going to go into a high-level overview of what and why, and then finally wrap things up with how using Pentaho technology. So first of all, let me introduce myself. Like the intro, I'm a engineer, software developer. I've been part of Pentaho for 9 years now, part of the core engineering team building the Pentaho suite of products. And Pentaho started off as an open source BI company before the big data, Hadoop, and NoSQL products came online. But in 2010, we, through our community actually, we recognized the value of big data early and started investing in updating our product lines to work well within Hadoop, with Hadoop, and then also with NoSQL and MPP databases like Vertica and Greenplum. So we've made major investments since 2010 in that area. And a couple years ago, and that's been very successful for Pentaho. As mentioned, we're now part of Hitachi, and we're having a good time at Hitachi. We've only been there for a few months, but Hitachi's vision for Pentaho is really about the Internet of Things that matter. So it's about building analytics for their entire business, not just their storage business, for their entire company. So whether it's mining or cars or hospitals or cities, Pentaho is going to be part of those solutions going forward. So it's a very exciting customer first, and now partner and parent. So a couple years ago, Pentaho started asking our customers, well, how are you using Pentaho? We're a tools company, so we don't always get to know why people buy our software. Our software can be downloaded online, evaluated by yourself, and then purchased. So a lot of times we don't know all the business cases for why people are using our software. So we went out and spent time with our customers, interviewing them and looking for patterns, and we found a number of repeated patterns in big data especially, and you see these in the market in general. Customer 360 is a great example of a big data use case that's being repeated over and over again by companies to better understand their customer and help reduce churn. So these use cases, I just charted them up here on a plot from easy to hard. So some big data use cases like data warehouse optimization, pretty straightforward value proposition for reducing costs in your data warehouse. To more advanced next generation applications, monetizing your data through big data. And actually the example I have today is a Streamlined Data Refinery, which is an architecture really. It's a repeatable approach for deploying a big data solution. But the example that I'm going to be using is actually of a next generation application for a fictional company that is monitoring, basically selling things like Fitbit. So the company is called BioMe, and you'll see how we built this out, and you could build these kind of applications as well. So that's how we sort of transition in these use cases, and now we're having business level conversations instead of technology and tool level conversations with our customers, and applying big data in a way that is really transforming business. And that's what we do at Pentaho primarily now. And like I said, today we're focused on the Streamlined Data Refinery. So, in a simple, the simplest diagram I could draw, what is a streamlined data refinery? Well, it always starts with the business in mind, right? With the business user. And what is the value that they get out of big data? What is the value the company gets out of big data? So I'm going to start up here at the top left with the request. So in a data refinery, the business user needs access to their data. And they may work for a very large company, or they may actually be a customer of a large company that's collecting data, but they want to access that data in some kind of way. And they usually need to request that data. And so in the Streamlined Data Refinery, this is sort of the entry point from a user perspective on how they get data. So they make a request out into this refinery, and then the refinery goes off and starts bringing that data together. So it blends that data from different data sources. It may have a large data lake of data in raw form, and it needs to process that data. And from there, the next step is really making that data available to the consumer. So, business users may not have expertise in SQL or in low-level data formats. So, having the data refinery automatically generate models for that business user so they can work and drag and drop and explore that data without the technical knowledge that often comes with big data environments. So, most big data environments are still used by developers, for developers, by developers, because they're advanced environments that require programming. And where Pentaho and these use cases come in are, raising the bar for users, so making it easier for users to work with these big data technologies. So then finally, once that data has been processed and is available, that data is published, and then the user in this use case would get an alert, right, that the data set's available. One example here is imagine every single stock transaction, and imagine the analysts that have to monitor for fraud. So there are billions of transactions per day, and all that data has to be collected and monitored. And analysts, and there are hundreds of analysts out there trying to monitor the stock market, look for fraud, and then enforce the regulations around the stock market trading. So that's one example of a streamlined data refinery where these analysts need to get access to that stock data, but obviously they can't access every single trade at once. They need to ask the data source, show me data from, for this particular entity, so this particular stock or this particular trader. I need to look into that and explore the data from a perspective for my analysis. And that's the kind of process that might take place within a streamlined data refinery. At the core of this refinery is governance, because in a data lake or in just a pure data form where you only have a few people working with data, there's not necessarily a need for governance. But when you get into larger organizations, you need to have lineage, you need to have security around the data. In some cases, like the example I'm going to show, the raw data may contain personally sensitive information that you need to cleanse before you make it available to your customers. So the governance is central, but at the same time, agility is central, right? That cycle of requesting the data and working with the data and accessing the raw data in a way that's governed. So how is a data refinery different than all the other architectures out there? So I'm going to highlight these three, but there are many other approaches to working with data. And but just to get started, so data warehouse, I'm guessing most people are familiar with data warehouse technology. It's been around for a long time. It's where Pentaho began our open BI journey. And the goal is really for executive level decision making. It's so a small number of people usually access the data warehouse for very strategic or reporting needs for finance or for business decisions. And it's often batch oriented, a nightly or weekly process. And the outcome of a data warehouse a lot of times are the KPIs of the business, right? Then we've introduced the data lake. That you see this from the big data vendors, the Hadoop vendors. And the data lake, its primary goal is exploration. You want to bring all that data together, and talented data scientists and researchers can explore that data and uncover insights that the business might not be aware of and have an impact on the business. And batch processing is still the traditional approach with MapReduce. More and more so you're seeing technologies like Spark and Storm and Kafka and others that are allowing for more real-time use cases within the data lake. And now we're getting into the data refinery use case, which is really about, it's really about automation and about putting, operationalizing your data. So making it available to a much larger group of people. And that data is, like I said, it's governed in a way that allows a larger number of people to access the data, because a lot of times, again, especially if you're working in finance or in health, you're working with sensitive data that has to be cleansed in ways and has to be managed in ways that are secure and governed. So again, so why this refinery? There's all this enormous amount of big data out there. I'm not going to spend tons of time talking about the different unstructured types of data, but there's social data, data coming out of applications, and then there's the traditional data warehouse data. We can't forget about the traditional CRM and data that we've had for a long time. All that data needs to come together and be useful for analytics. So because there's so much data, you can't pre-process it all. You can't put it all in a data warehouse at this stage. So you have to make compromises. And what a refinery allows you to do is, selectively go into your raw data and choose which data you're going to pull out of that and focus the search, the data set. You also want that on demand. The example of the stock market use case, where I'm an analyst and I really want to look into this stock. I don't want to look at data from a week ago. I want to look at data that will maybe trades that are happening live. So I need to look into the lake and get access to that data immediately. And because these use cases are operational, the real-time component is very important. So near real-time use cases are very critical. And it's driven not by top-down batch processing, but by user requests, by process requests. An example of a process example is, imagine that you're collecting machine data and there's an anomaly in the data. So it doesn't take too much processing to determine that there's an anomaly, but now you want to do analytics on that anomaly quickly to correct the system. And the analyst who wants to do that work may need access to a larger data set than just that piece of data. They may want to look at data before and after the anomaly. They may want to pull in data from other sources to explore that anomaly. And a Streamlined Data Refinery is a perfect way to go about that. So when the anomaly occurs, it could automatically trigger a process similar to that cycle of process, except for instead of a user driving the process, a machine event drives the process. And then that data set's available then to the analyst or to the professional who needs to make decisions, and they can quickly see what's going on with a broader view. And finally, as I mentioned many times, the governance requirements, the security auditing, cleansing of the data, so removing, masking data, those kind of steps need to take place as well in a data refinery often. So again, to highlight sort of the three main areas of the data refinery, there's the first step of blending and enriching the data. Then we move into orchestrating and governing that data. And then finally, delivering that data to a consumer so they can work with the data, and managing that data set once it's made available to the user if possible. So that's a high-level view of the Streamlined Data Refinery. Now I'm going to connect the dots to Pentaho. How did we get involved in this, and where do our tools fit in? Because we don't solve the Streamlined Data Refinery on our own. We're not a database. We're not a file system. So we build tools that make those environments more powerful. First, in our core technology is our data integration offering. This is a product that allows users to just visually drag and drop and build data processes, both in Hadoop and then outside of Hadoop. We had one of the researchers at Hitachi actually got our data integration environment, which is, the core is open source, was able to run that within a Raspberry Pi and demonstrate an IoT use case right from a Raspberry Pi. So a very lightweight engine, but it can be deployed in many use cases, including Hadoop. Then we move into our analytics offering, so reporting and dashboards, traditional BI components, but they can be used and embedded in applications. And now Pentaho is primarily focused on embedded analytics. And what that means are, a lot of companies have a larger problem or offer a larger solution, and included in that solution is an analytics offering. So oftentimes customers come to us and say, we need analytics within our product, but we don't want to write it from scratch. So they take Pentaho's capabilities around reporting and analysis and visualization and embed that into their bigger application. And then finally, we have a product known as Weka that allows for machine learning and predictive analytics. And that started off as a project at the University of Hokkaido and is now supports Spark and the machine learning algorithms like k-means and traditional algorithms like linear regression are all built into that environment, and that environment allows you to test your predictive models. And what the core value of the Pentaho platform are all three of these general capabilities are all integrated deeply with one another and can solve these problems like the Streamlined Data Refinery use case. So now I'm going to map that to the Streamlined Data Refinery architecture. So this is a high-level view of where the components fit in. You have all the raw data out there, whether it's on the web or social media, and you're coming from your sensors or in transactional databases. All this data is out there and available, but it's oftentimes coders are necessary to access that data, and a lot of times coding is required. But with Pentaho data integration, in a lot of cases, there are already components built that allow you to access, like make web service calls or access SQL databases, or even connect up with technologies like Kafka or JMS to get stream data out of these different environments. And if Pentaho data integration can't solve it, there are other technologies like Flume and Scoop and other great Hadoop technologies that allow you to ingest data into your Hadoop environment. Once your data is in a big data environment like Hadoop, then you need to process it there. And there are a lot of technologies. Spark is what's known as, as the latest and greatest of the data processing tools out there. And actually, Pentaho data integration, we just started supporting Spark, and we're going to continue to work with that. But what we try to do, again, is to provide that visual experience, so you don't have to write Spark code. You don't have to write MapReduce. You can just use a visual environment to define your data processes within Hadoop. And then finally, Hadoop is a great environment for storing data and processing data, but today at least, you still really need to bring along an analytical database like Vertica or Greenplum in order to do that online analytic processing with our tools and other BI tools like Tableau and such. So, and that's one thing to keep in mind as well. I'm talking about Pentaho tools tonight. This architecture really applies to the environment. It's not Pentaho only, right? You could replace our components with third-party components, and the one value proposition we have is that these technologies are all connected with Pentaho. It's a single platform, and so in this example, in the Streamlined Data Refinery example, the analytics environment can work with the integration environment for extracting those data sets out of Hadoop, right? So it could business user can see summaries of the data and then request deeper analysis, and that cycle. That full cycle can happen with Pentaho tools. So, if I'm a company and I want to deploy a Streamlined Data Refinery, there's some just basic steps that you need to get started. And this is an iterative, as you can see with step 5, it's an iterative process. But the first is getting access to the data. So, whether it's your relational data or data online or from your machine data, you need to set that process up. You need to start building that data lake. From there, oftentimes you want to pull out summaries of certain data sets. So there are cues. I mentioned the alerts from an anomaly may trigger something, or for instance, if a business user, in the example I'm going to show, a researcher may want to select a subset of the data. So you have to have some metadata summarization of the data before you can move into this next process, which is really parameterized data processing. So folks are familiar with ETL. It's a pretty static context, static extract, transform, and load process. You define those processes and they run nightly forever, and they're part of your core business and very traditional, right? Not very agile. The parameterized data processing is a really dynamic environment. So you can define processes where you may not know the answers yet. So you may not know about the unstructured data yet, And there are tools within Pentaho that allow you to build these processes out, and I'm going to walk you through this BioMe example to demonstrate the parameterization and why that's important. And finally, you want to integrate that into your business process. So, and it might start off as simple as making these, Excel data set available in my email every morning from a data lake, to something more advanced where I'm doing slice and dice analytics for an operational need, or in the case I'm going to show, where you're actually selling your data to your customers, and they're the ones accessing the data lake and getting out the information that they need. So now I'm going to transition over to the product and walk you through the BioMe example. And it's always dangerous changing the projector around. It's a little blurry. Can everybody see that okay? A little blurry?
You want to try it? My eyesight is not the best, so
I'm going to see if maybe it's the resolution.
No, we got it.
Oh, okay.
No, it's still too small.
It's small, but it's small. It's in focus.
Here, we have, so it's a nice, usability feature. You can increase the size of the transformation. So, let's say you wanted to evaluate Pentaho and you downloaded our products. You start off with a blank canvas. And again, this is the value of defining business cases and defining, solutions. And this solution you can go download online and try it out yourself to get the full experience. But oftentimes people download the product and see this, right? It's a palette of all kinds. You can access any kind of data, and you can run this anywhere. So where do you even begin? That's why I think the Streamlined Data Refinery is a great use case, because it sort of gives you a foundation to start with these kind of tools, and it can solve specific use cases. So that's Pentaho data integration. Let me first start off by taking you to, from the user's perspective, what they're going to see before I go into, well, how did I build it? So this is the BioMe example. The use case is pretty simple. Imagine an imaginary company that is collecting a lot of health data, heart rate data, and other types of health data from their customers. And in order, they're making good money off of that, but they also want to monetize the data set by selling to researchers and big pharma, the aggregated data. So they want to sell the data and allow those customers to access it, but it has to be done in a governed way. They can't provide the raw data to those customers, and it's a large amount of data, right? They're selling millions of these devices and collecting, all that data across the world. So it's too large to just shrink wrap and send over to their customers. And that's sort of the imaginary company that we put together to demonstrate this. And so this is the portal, and what we're seeing here so far is primarily HTML and CSS built. This is just their web app that they've built, their developers have built. But they've embedded Pentaho technology into their web portal. So the visualizations, for instance, and the form, you'll see, those are actually built with Pentaho and trigger Pentaho processes behind the scenes. So in this case, I'm John Doe. I'm coming in here as a researcher, and I want to study. Let's say I'm studying aging, and I want to look at the heart rate, as folks age, and because I'm working on age-related diseases. Actually, I started my career working on Alzheimer's research and Huntington's disease, all these different aging-related diseases that impact the general population. So Alzheimer's in particular, having data like this could be very useful for detecting Alzheimer's, because the earlier you detect it, the more we can do to treat it and to help folks. So in this case, I can see high-level information about different countries and such, but I want to drill down into the data and explore it for my particular use case. So imagine I want to go in and look at the data from the United States, and like I mentioned, I'm studying aging, so maybe I want to look at the folks over 50, and then I want to look at the entire data set. So I've shrunk the data set down, and this experience, this back and forth experience between the application and the backend services, so like the services that are populating the countries and these parameters are all driven by Pentaho, and I'll show you how those are built behind the scenes here in a minute. And then, so, but as a business user, I don't have to see any of that. I can just go in here and select my, so I can select the data set here, click Analyze, and it'll submit that request to the data refinery. And the data, I can then maybe get an email if I've set it up to get an email or get a text. In this case, it's just going to notify me when I'm ready, and I'll see a notification up here. And this is a contrived example all running on my laptop, so it's not an actual big data use case, right? So, so luckily it ran very quickly. And now I can go in and view that data set that I just selected. And in this case, the company went ahead and built some, predefined reports to help that pharma company or the researcher to explore the data. But then the researcher with Pentaho technology can quickly go in and start exploring the data set on their own. And you can see it's already organized in a way for that researcher. The researcher didn't have to define dimensions or models. They could just go in and start slicing and dicing the data, visualizing the data. And there's some other example. So this is highlighting our embedded analytics more than our back-end capability. And where I really want to focus in is that Streamlined Data Refinery core component, which really happens behind the scenes. So up until, this just seems like a regular web app, right, that I've used. And from a business user perspective, that's all it is. From a company's perspective, there's a lot of work that goes on behind the scenes to make this kind of data set possible and the exploration possible. And that work happens here in our visual environment. Now, if you're a coder, you may not be interested in a drag and drop process, defining processes. But most of us aren't coders. Most of us are visual thinkers. And so a tool like this just allows you to define a visual process from start to finish, whether you're reading data from different services. Let's say you want to pull in Salesforce data, or and then writing out to Excel or or to another environment, Tableau. There's lots of different integration points in this environment, so I can define pretty complex processes, as we'll see, beyond just simple data in, data out use case. So let's go into the BioMe example. When I first clicked on that submit data set, what happens is a transformation, these are transformations, the transformation is fired behind the scenes that is actually going through the phases of that data refinery that I mentioned beforehand. So in this case, the data refinery is, first it's setting up the environment in which the data is going to land. So let's say you're using Vertica as an example. It'll prep Vertica for incoming data. So this is an orchestration environment here, where I'm actually telling the different Vertica environment, the Hadoop environment, or maybe I'm calling out to web services. I'm orchestrating all those steps through the path of processing the data and preparing it for the business user. Now, of course, along the way, things can go wrong, right? And you want to understand those. So within the environment, there's error handling. You can, in this case, we're just aborting the job. But let's say we wanted to email the the maintainer of the system, hey, something went wrong, or page them. That kind of stuff is possible right within this orchestration environment. So first, you're going to prepare that analytic environment. Then you're going to go ahead and run the refinery transformation, and that's the work that happens in Hadoop, where you're processing the data and then storing it in the analytic environment. So here, let me walk you through this example. For instance, is just is simply going to a CSV file. So my big data lake here is a set of CSV files. So actually, a lot of data lakes are CSV files, but just a lot of them, right? Or a lot of log files. Probably if this was closer to a real use case, we'd have raw log files from the sensor data inside of Hadoop, right? Inside of HDFS, and metadata processes running to keep keep an eye out, like what are all the files there, what are the date ranges, what are the statistics of that data, so then users can go in and pull out slices of that data. Yeah, so from here we're gonna look through that sample and we're gonna apply filters to that sample. So we're gonna deploy like a MapReduce job or a storm process or a yarn process. There's a lot of different ways you can deploy Pentaho, and you're going to stream through that data and filter out the data that the user is looking for. So in this case, we're filtering on the you saw the filter for age. So let's scroll over for the filter for age, and in this case, it's just a simple age filter defined in a GUI type of environment. But if you like scripting or something, you can always actually in this environment you can use JavaScript. You can use, let's say you're a data scientist and you want to deploy your models here. So let's say you want to do scoring of the data set as it's streaming through the data refinery. We have statistics and machine learning steps right within the environment. So if you want to do R, we have a Python component coming soon. So there's a lot of different ways to process the data within Hadoop. And this environment allows you to orchestrate that and build those processes right within this visual environment. And then as you're developing this, you probably want to test it. So you can run these on your local machine to test them. You could then deploy them in Hadoop and monitor them, and as you're setting up the refinery. Now there's a lot more to the refinery than just this core process. After the core process runs and the raw data is transformed into a more structured data, then we actually take that SQL data, which is maybe useful for a lot of people, and actually model it with our analytic layer. So we build a OLAP model on top of the SQL model, so a business user can then slice and dice that data. And this is all built in right within the product. We'll analyze that table and also take cues from the transformation and build up a model. And it's a very simple dialog that you populate. And we have our models will look at the data types and the field names and try to make decisions around how to model that. And if that's not satisfactory, you can go in and add